Bad presence means what? Like ghosts?
Red flags I should watch out for when choosing a real estate agent.
Totally crazy for thinking of buying into $1 million flat. Hello everyone, I'm Sophia.
And I'm Lauren.
And today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're actually going to be having a Q&A session.
Yeah, so some of you have actually submitted your questions on our social media platform, and we have actually selected a few really interesting ones.
Very interesting.
Yes.
So let's get started.
My wife and I have been looking for a new place for a while, and we finally found one that she really loves. But now my mom says she feels a bad presence in the house. Should we still go ahead with it? How can we figure out if anyone has passed away?
Bad presence means what? Like ghosts?
I would think so.
Oh my, you know what this reminds me of? Do you remember we saw this article a while back, the Potong Pasir HDB?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So basically this family, they bought a flat in Potong Pasir, and only after they moved in 3 weeks, then they found out from, I think, the neighbours or something, that the previous owner actually passed away inside. Only like 9 years later, then they found the skeletal remains.
Yes.
I don't know if it's you, will you be okay after you find out?
I mean, I have read the news to that extent, knowing that the skeletal remains have been found 9 years later, I will definitely be spooked.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm also a bit scared. I can't even watch horror movies. Okay, but from a real standpoint of view, are there actually ways you can find out if someone has passed away in the house? So technically in Singapore, if let's say you go and view a house and you don't ask the agent, they don't actually need to disclose to you.
Yes.
But if you do ask, it's actually under the Code of Ethics where they actually have to tell you if they know that someone has passed away in the house. So in Singapore, it's a bit different. If you go to other countries like Japan, for example, it's actually required by them to let you know. But I think there are also some other ways you can check, if I'm not wrong. The ownership.
Yeah, so you can actually check the title deed, and you can do a check against the obituary, or you can just Google. Usually what I will do is I will ask the seller agent or the seller themselves, like, what are their reasons for selling. I find that this is a very subtle way of trying to suss out actually what's going on. Like maybe they'll tell you they are going to upgrade, then I think it's pretty straightforward. But if they are selling because the owner has passed away or something like that, if you actually ask it, the agent has to give you the answer to their best, as best as they can.
But Laura, I got one question for you. If you're the buyer, then you find out someone died inside, but then they're selling 100k cheaper. Is it a good deal for you, or will you go for it or not?
Well, it really depends. I mean, yes, 100k is a huge capital savings, to be honest. But if it's going to take away my peace and I can't sleep every night, then probably no.
So I think I guess it's an individual thing. Actually, this is quite a unique problem to Singapore, I would say, right? Because we're such a young country.
Yes.
But honestly, when we go and travel to Europe, you stay in your Airbnb, all this, right? When the buildings are hundreds of years old.
Yeah.
Definitely, I think somebody has passed away inside already. So it really comes down to your personal preference. But if this is something really important to you and you're looking at older estates, for example, these are the few ways you can actually check.
Yeah.
Next question is about one of the areas you love, Lauren.
Yeah.
Which is Marine Parade.
D15.
So I'm looking at HDBs in Marine Parade for proximity to primary schools in the area. But the condos there are way above my budget. Are the HDBs there even worth considering, or should I be looking elsewhere?
Wow, I mean, D15 is quite a prime estate. But then again, I mean, Sophia, you're quite familiar with that area, right? Yeah.
Okay, so I do have relatives staying at Marine Parade. So for the HDBs there, okay, let's say you really, really want to go to that area because of a certain primary school, there's not going to be any cheaper option there than the HDBs. That is a fact. And of course, you get nice views there, etc. But some things you might want to take note is that if you're going into a HDB in Marine Parade, because they are all quite a bit down their lease, they were mostly built in the 70s. So that makes them about like 50 plus year old now. Okay, so one thing that most people don't realize, especially if they're looking at older HDB estates like Tiong Bahru, Marine Parade, for example, is that when you take a loan for your flat, okay, what the bank is going to do, or rather HDB, is look at what is the youngest owner age and what is the remaining remaining lease of the HDB. Now, if that doesn't match up to 99 years, they will not actually give you the full loan. So in that case, you might actually be putting in even more cash than if you went for the condo option. However, if that's not issue for you, age loan wise, everything, this is going to be the cheapest option for you going into Marine Parade. But you need to be very aware that down the line, there may be less people that are able to buy, especially when we're talking about younger buyers.
Correct.
That's why this estate, because Marine Parade, really no new HDB for a lot of years.
That's what I realized. And just to add on to Sophia's point, right, from the bank's point of view, for on top of that, right, if your remaining lease is more than 60 years, you can actually use CPF as per normal. But if the remaining lease is less than 60 and then 30 or more, your CPF usage will be prorated, meaning to say you have to top up more cash and at the upfront. And also for bank's point of view, there will be restriction if the flat remaining lease is too low, because at the end of the loan tenor, right, it has to be at least 30 years remaining. So let's say if the flat is like 50 years old, you can only take up to maximum of 20 years instead of the maximum of 25 years. Yeah, it will definitely affect your affordability. So if you're looking at Marine Parade and if the condos are above your budget, like what Sophia has mentioned, HDB is the cheapest option that you can get there. Just have to be wary of all these factors.
So to sum up, right, if you're really going for the Marine Parade HDB, just make sure that you qualify for the loan and your CPF usage as well. But do keep in mind that if you want to exit in the future, it may take a little while.
Yes.
But if you're looking for something that is near D15 where there are younger flats, you can go for somewhere like, I think the Kota area has a few BTO, or Dunman area rather.
Yes, the Mountbatten area, Dakota, yes, there are a few new BTOs up there, but it's not going to be cheap. When it reaches MOP, right, it will be close to 1 million, which we have another question that is something relating to $1 million flat, which we will be sharing on later. Moving on to the next question, and I find that this is really relevant. What are some red flags I should watch out for when choosing a real estate agent? Seen too much news of sketchy ones.
Hey, I swear there's always a lot of articles out there that give agents a very bad rap, okay?
A lot of black sheeps in this industry.
So what to you, Lauren, should you look out for as a red flag?
I think first thing first, you should not be very pushy about whatever products that you have in mind as a real estate agent, because first thing, the most important part is you have to first understand your client's needs. Do you agree with me?
Yeah, I mean, I think even, looking out of it from a real estate context, like if I'm hiring anybody like a ID or whatever service person, the number one thing that I'm looking out for is, are they listening to me first, like what I want and what I need, before basically giving me a diagnosis of what I should be looking at, essentially. I tell you, one of the things, that I feel is a red flag. You know what a crystal ball agent is or not?
Yes, I know.
If you ever meet anybody that tell you, I guarantee you, which I confirm you hear out there before, okay? I guarantee you, like 3 years from now, you can make XXX number, whatever, okay? Run, okay? Because honestly, nobody can predict what the price will be like in the future,
Exactly.
okay?
That's why they are called the crystal ball agents.
I mean, I think it's fine if you're looking at a certain area to see how it's doing, how the demand is like there, and then you do an estimate from there. But if anyone ever promise or guarantee you, right, there is no such thing, okay? Nobody can predict the future.
Yeah.
So that to me is a red flag, because we always want to be prepared for the worst scenario as well as the best scenario. So if you're going to have all these promises and leave you stuck, that to me is like very, very dangerous, you know?
Yeah. I mean, like for me, sometimes I do recommend, let's say if my clients come to me and said that, which do you think is better? Yes, then I would recommend backed by data. But I will never ever say that confirm guarantee you can earn how much. Because sometimes if based on data, you have two different types of properties, one is doing so much better and compared to the other type of properties, then of course we would recommend the better one, but we will never ever overpromise your returns.
And I think going back to your first point, where is listening to the needs of the clients, that's what you should be looking out for. And of course, look for someone that really matches your vibe as well as your goals. But one thing to me is, like, us here as agent, whether it's us or someone else, our job is not to decide for the buyer or the seller, I would always think of it like a metaphor, like almost like we are doctors. You come to us with the problem, we will tell you what are the solutions available and what is the, sorry, I lost my voice this weekend. And what are the pros and cons of each solution. But ultimately, the decision is yours. We can tell you what's the lowest to the highest risk, but there should be never anyone pushing you into the decision by pressurizing you, because ultimately, this is a very big decision.
Yeah, I do agree. And because this is a very big decision, this agent should really follow through from the start right until the end. Even after the end, right, the red flag to me is they ghost you after the deal. Right.
So after you sell already, your agent don't reply you.
Yes.
That's very sad.
Have you ever have clients telling you this?
Yeah, I think I encountered a few before.
Yeah, I mean, my personal friend actually told me that after they bought a unit and upon completion, you know, the agent stopped replying their messages. I was really appalled. Can someone actually
so they just
do that?
MIA?
Yeah.
I think call the number, don't pick up all it.
They just don't reply anything because the deal is over, right? It's completed.
That's so sad like that.
Irresponsible. I mean, I think that's a red flag.
Okay, so to summarize the red flags that we have discussed, no crystal ball agent. Okay, number 2, please look for someone that listens to your needs first.
Yep.
Number 3, that doesn't pressurize you into this decision. And lastly, look for someone that you feel will not MIA after.
No ghosting.
Yeah, because sometimes when a deal is negotiated, right, you sign option close, there still can be a lot of things that happen after that. So you really need someone that is going to be by your side that you trust also.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to the next question. Alright, so this one, outside of the submission here, I think I got asked like 5-6 times on the ground before already, which is, am I totally crazy for thinking of buying into $1 million flat? How? What about you? Will you buy $1 million flat?
FYI, I have $1 million flat that's upcoming also.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Shameless plug now.
To be honest, all the good areas in Singapore right now, the BTO, let's say Bidadari, they are all going to be $1 million already, sooner or later.
Okay, I mean, to me, if you really look at the listings out there that are selling for over $1 million, this is still quite a small percentage of the overall HDB resale market. But the one thing you'll see is that they actually have this very common trait for most of them, which most of them are, I would say, quite central areas.
Yes, location.
Okay, so that we're talking about like Dawson and Bidadari, Toa Payoh. This is where we're seeing a lot of $1 million flats, right? But I think the question this person is really asking here is, if I go in, whether I can still exit next time at $1 million price tag. And that being the case, right, I think currently we're going to see a shift in the next few years. Like Lauren, we have the PRH model coming up, correct?
Yes.
Yep. So for prime areas, as most of you might know for now, all the new HDBs coming up, MOP is 10 years, right? I believe.
Yeah, meaning to say, once you have collected keys, you are not able to sell for the next 10 years.
I think among that, there's some other criteria as well,
Even
right?
if after you sell, there is some clawback amount. Yeah, they are actually capping the. They want to reduce the kind of lottery effects that, you know, for example, Pinnacle at Duxton is getting. Yeah, so people actually bought during the BTO phase for like maybe 400 to 500K, and now have you seen the prices?
1.2, 1.3,
Yeah,
around there, right?
Even the highest the highest record breaking price is at 1.5 plus million for Pinnacle at Duxton. So that one is easily 3x their purchase price. So I think government is trying to clamp down on all this. So do you think that is insane for them to even consider $1 million flats?
I think for all the things you mentioned, right, that is actually going to have a rollover effect to the resale price of these $1 million flats in the future. So what do I mean by that? If you want to be able to hold your value, generally I say you need a very unique USP, right? So come the future down the road where these PRH model hit the market, if I am the new PRH one, then when I can sell a resale, whoever buy only 10 years later can sell. Then my next door neighbor that is still quite young, if I go into there for not too different of a price, 5 years later I can sell. Can I say that these $1 million flats right now at that point will still look more attractive than some of the PRH flats?
To be honest, if you were to ask me, because HDB, there's a MOP period. So when you buy over the first $1 million HDB, it is already minimally 5 years old. Am I right to say that?
Yeah.
So for you to exit next time, you have to hold for another 5 years, meaning to say your flat will be at least 10 years old. 10 years old to me, it is not too old a flat. The remaining lease is still like 80 plus. So it really depends on your plan. If you are looking at a shorter runway to exit next time, I do think that the value will hold for $1 million flats, because we have mentioned, right, $1 million flats, usually they are located at better locations, like more centralized, and the demand is there. That's why they're hitting that kind of amount for a HDB compared to somewhere else like Woodlands, etc. Yeah, so it depends on the runway of your property plans.
Yeah, I think it will still be able to hold that kind of unique advantage, at least for the first 20 years of its lease. Maybe after that, then we'll see that it starts to balance out a bit. But if you're looking at more outskirt areas like what you mentioned, do also be very wary that the government is pumping in a lot of supply there to kind of balance out the price. So if you're buying something that is not $1 million flat in the central area, do look for things that have a bit more unique USP. For example, even if you're near the MRT, for example, or schools, things that the newer flats would otherwise fall under. I think the Plus scheme also now exists, which also has the 10-year MOP. So are you crazy for buying $1 million flat? I would say you have a good chance of exiting at a good price still. But even if you're buying at this price with this unique advantage per se in the future, also don't look at how your price compares to your other neighbors that are buying in now. Don't know whether you have a safe exit.
I mean, at the end of the day, it really depends on your needs and what actually are you looking for to buy this house. I mean, a home is for you to stay, right? Probably you really need to stay near this place, near your parents, and you're planning for your kids' school nearby. Then I would say go ahead. Yeah, but everyone has different needs. So I think it's very hard for us to give a very an answer to you. We really need to have more info. So do reach out to us if you want to have a personalized discussion on this. Move on to the next question. I see a lot of my friends renting or moving back with their parents while upgrading their homes. I'm not comfortable with the idea of moving around too much, but I also do not want to get left behind. Is it possible to sell and buy a new place without being homeless?
Okay, I think the issue this guy is having or this girl is having to distill it is he wants to sell his place and upgrade. By upgrade, I'm guessing he wants to buy something new. That's why he needs somewhere to stay in between. Is it?
It can be new, it can be not new. But I find that many a times people always have the thinking that if I were to sell and buy, I have to complete my sale first before my purchase. Then there's a gap in between where I'm homeless.
Yeah, honestly, I agree that it's quite a scary concept, especially if you don't really understand the timeline much. Like, I'm talking about families, you know, if like I said, I have 3-4 kids, I'll be very scared after I sell my home, I got nowhere to go. But there are some options you can consider.
Okay, I find that for this, it is very important for your agent to strategize the timeline for you properly. Because with proper timeline planning, you actually wouldn't really be left homeless. So what do I mean by that? For example, you can actually sell first and negotiate for a delayed handover or a longer option period before you go ahead with your purchase. So in that case, if you were to time it properly, right, you can actually move to your new place first even before the completion of your sale. So with that, right, there is no gap in between. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really about planning the timeline properly, I guess.
Correct.
I've also seen, honestly, I remember I met this old lady last time. So basically she sold her flat already, but then she had no idea that she can basically get an extension if the seller agreed to it, or rather the buyer agreed to it.
Right.
So actually for 3 months, and this is an old lady, she was staying in hotels because her kids don't even have space to basically help her in the home. So she was moving for between 2 hotels, I think, before her next flat was ready, which honestly, like, I feel quite happy when I hear that. Because you imagine...
How much is there at hotel?
Yeah, I can just imagine, okay, how much is like a medium hotel? 300-400, I guess. Yeah, then you multiply that by 3 months. So in essence, right?
Yeah.
You're calculating how much it is.
Yeah, I'm just
300-400. This is 27k 27k on hotel.
Yeah, so imagine, Sophia, you could have saved this 27,000. At the same time, you are able to stay in your house if your agent actually negotiated properly from the start for the extension, which is actually quite common, yeah. And one more thing to add on from the mortgage point of view is that if you were to complete your sale later than your purchase, right, you can actually also opt for a bridging loan. So I realized that, like I've mentioned, a lot of time people do not have clarity in terms of the timeline. They thought that they need to complete the sale first to wait for the proceeds to come back into their bank before they complete the purchase for them to be able to afford the payment to the purchase. But actually, that's not the case because banks actually do provide bridging loan as long as your current house has been sold and exercised.
Yeah, so there are actually quite a few options out there.
Yeah.
And I think because often when we meet quite a lot of sellers also, I think they have this mentality that, I want to find the next house I want to buy first, then I want to sell. Because it's a very scary concept not to know where you are going to next, right?
This is very real.
Yeah, but honestly, it's important to actually do both concurrently, I would say, as long as you have a clear idea of what's your timeline. Because sometimes if let's say you find a very good deal on one side, then it's worth it to have a certain price on this side. So actually both go hand in hand, rather than you buy and after that you cannot sell and then you're stuck, which is a whole other headache altogether. So definitely there are different options. You can do your research online or speak to your agent or us if you need any advice on this. But yeah, I can totally understand the struggle for this. On to our next question. So I have been looking at some of the new launches to purchase my first home. Even went down to have a look at Parktown at Emerald of Katong. My issue is my parents are partially funding this purchase, which means they have a say in what I choose. They strongly believe only freehold projects are worth considering. My God, we always hear this.
Yes.
But most of those new projects I find myself drawn to are leasehold. Does freehold really have that much of a value in the long run?
I think we are back to this very classic question.
Yes.
Is freehold or leasehold better?
Okay, so I think the answer to that really depends on what is your objective, okay? Because freehold and leasehold both are going to have their own advantages. So for those of you not familiar, freehold is where you essentially have an unlimited lease on your home, right? And then for leasehold, most of the time it is 99 years. And then after that, you technically give the place back to the government in a way.
Or
so
en bloc.
So which is better? Now, if we think about it from the perspective of our parents' time, a lot of them, especially this age range of, I think, over 50 plus and above buyers, they will have this notion that freehold always does better.
Yes.
And this is because of their sentiment from the market that time, right? But if we look, like, let's say you're buying something to in the short run sell, for example, actually the data really shows quite the opposite, where actually in the past 10 years, even if you look, right, I'll insert the chart here later on, but for leasehold, they actually have a bigger growth than freehold within the 10 years. And I think this difference in sentiment comes a lot from back then, our parents' time, right? They can essentially buy the house and then the very next day, right, they can sell it off already. There's no such thing as 3 years SSD. There's not even such thing as ABSD. They can buy multiple property in one day. So at least from my relatives that I talk to, the idea they have back then, right, is I'll find a very solid freehold one for my family to stay in the long run. And then at the side, whatever property I buy for investment, I sell off, it doesn't really matter to me. As long as my home base, the freehold one, can hold the value in the long run. But today, where most of us can only have one property under our name, this is a very different scenario, right? So if you're looking, this is not the end of your journey, you're probably looking to move in the future. You want something that you can potentially, I guess, exit with a profit. And if we're looking at that, actually both freehold and leasehold are able to do that. Maybe leasehold a bit faster based on what we see in the data. But of course, it also comes down to which of the projects or which areas you are looking in as well.
I mean, if this buyer was looking at EOK, Parktown, I think these are pretty decent new launches, right? It's just that it's 99 years and the parents on the other side prefers freehold. Unfortunately. Okay, let's be real. Okay, most buyers nowadays, they don't hold their property for that long anymore unless they want to buy and pass it down to the next generation. Meaning to say, if you buy young, you have to stay there until the end of your time before you pass it down to the next generation.
Like legacy homes lah.
Yeah, but most buyers nowadays, they don't keep their properties for so long. They sell after 5 to 10 years, like due to lifestyle changes and upgrading or even capital gains. Like they do see see the capital gain, and then it prompted them to just cash out and move on to maybe upgrade to a bigger property or another location that suits their family needs at that point in time. I mean, 10 years, even 15, 20 years is a very long time. If you have a kid, right, it would be from born all the way to secondary school, you know. So
yeah, the changes big already.
Yeah, so this whole what happens, is freehold or leasehold better? It really depends on your planning. Are you going to hold it for a very, very long time, or are you going to exit, or you might have plans to exit in the near future? So I understand that your parent is actually funding, so they do have a say. Yes. So like what Sophia has mentioned, this is I do have clients on hand that is of such scenario, because usually the older generation, they do prefer freehold. I mean, right?
Yeah, so I guess essentially the short answer is, if you're looking at it from a purely numbers perspective, right, in the short run, actually leasehold is able to outperform freehold based on what we've seen in the past few years. But end of the day, it really still comes down to exactly which areas you are looking at, because I guess in some areas, the freehold price is even very close to the leasehold, where other areas you see a much bigger gap. Yeah. So depending on where you're looking at and which projects, you can look at the number deeper. If you need some help, you can reach out to us. But overall, I would say that it's not that freehold inexplicably has a better advantage over leasehold right now.
Yeah, because a good leasehold in the right place will always beat a bad freehold in a wrong place. Okay, our last question. I've heard 1-bedroom condos can be tough to sell later on, but my budget only allows for something smaller. Should I still go ahead with it, or wait until I can afford something bigger?
Okay, this is a very common scenario I see, especially with younger buyers, where they want to get their first property, but they're not really eligible for a HDB either at that age, or whatever the circumstance is. But when they go to condo, they're also mostly limited to 1-bedrooms. To be very honest, when we look at the profit margin, can I say that very often we'll see a smaller one for 1-bedroom versus bigger ones?
For sure.
But why is it that people are still buying the 1-bedroom? I think it really depends on your intention. So for example, if you are buying this to, I think, rent out, it's still a good option, because honestly, if you can find a good value 1-bedroom, and you're renting it out concurrently, someone is paying your mortgage, and that's going to accumulate the value over time, which means that even at the end of the day, right, you sell this home for exactly the price you buy it. Let's say it doesn't go up at all, you'll still be able to jump to a higher value, maybe a 2-bedroom next, a lot easier.
Yes.
So that's one strategy.
Correct. Usually for 1-bedroom, right, it has lower entry price and higher rental yield. So this actually brings me, recently you did a video on One Marina Gardens.
Yes.
Yeah, so you talked about the rental yield over there, right? Yeah, so from my understanding, why is it attractive is because their 1-bedder actually only starts from 1.16. Yeah, and the rental yield in the marina area is actually very, very high.
Yeah, easily above 4%.
Exactly.
Which, just for a baseline, if you're looking on your own, you always want to try and find something that's at least above 3%, I would say, when it comes to rental yield.
Correct. So in that sense, if you're going towards the strategy of collecting rental yield and not so much of the capital growth, then I would think that why not? Right.
Essentially, you're buying a home for someone else to pay for it first and your mortgage. But what if it's for your own stay?
To be honest, I mean, like, it is trickier for you to exit next time compared to bigger units, like even a 2-bedder onwards. So because the resale pool in future who are looking for a 1-bedder, they will also be limited. Yeah.
So I would say my best advice, if you are buying it for your own stay, is really to be very price sensitive. Like, for example, I know it may look like, okay, I want to go for the better pool view because I'm staying on my own. But you really just need to keep in mind that if you're buying a 1-bedroom, it is very likely your future buyer, at least a big pool of them, are actually investors. So for them, the number one priority is whether they can make money, right? So they are going to be way more price sensitive. So buy something you like, you can stay in, but also be very mindful of the price. And end of the day, even if, let's say, you make even 80k or 100k from it, this is still going to give you a better springboard to the next bigger size.
It depends on the location, because because of the latest URA guidelines, there are some locations that's building lesser and lesser shoebox and one bedder units.
Oh yeah, okay. So just to touch a bit on this, we won't go too much into the details of the ruling, but essentially, a couple of years ago, there was this new rule that came out where for certain areas in Singapore, let's say the developer buys a piece of land, okay? Previously, maybe they can build 500 unit.
Yeah.
Now with this new calculation that is enforced on them, they can actually build less. So because there are less unit, the incentive for them to build smaller ones is actually a lot less from like a business perspective also. So for certain areas, like if you see some of the new launches, like example, Key Residence a while ago, you'll see that less and less of them actually have one bedroom. A lot of them are starting from 2 bedrooms now. Yeah. But then on other areas, right, like central area, we see the opposite situation where there are so many small units.
Yeah, so ultimately it boils down to the location that you are looking at, because in central area, the rental is very, very attractive. So in that sense, they also know that a lot of investors who are looking at rental yield will come into the central area, and that's why the one bedder is actually very popular.
So overall, we would say if you're looking at one bedroom, whether it is for own stay, for investment, just be very, very price sensitive and know depending on the area you're going into, what is the exit horizon. Because maybe sometimes if you're buying new, for example, you may need to stay or rent out for a while. So just make sure you have a bit of holding power when it comes to that.
Okay, that's all for our Q&A today.
We hope you had as much fun and you found it as informative as we did looking at all your questions.
And if you have some more burning questions, do reach out to us in our listed contacts.
Or you can drop them in the comments below and we'll catch you all next time.